Dr. Meekison, by virtue of the authority vested in me by the Royal Roads University Act, and in accordance with the recommendation of the Board of Governors of Royal Roads University, I confer upon you the degree of Doctor of Laws, honoris causa, with all the rights, privileges, and honors hereto and thereto appertaining. Dr. Meekison will now be hooded by Dr. Pedro Marquez. Dr. Alan Cahoon will now present Dr. Meekison with his degree. It is with great pleasure that I now call upon Dr. Meekison to deliver the Convocation Address.
Eminent Chancellor and graduates, first let me extend my congratulations to Chancellor-elect Kathleen Birney. Wayne, thank you for your very kind introduction. I am honored today to speak to you a bit about some ideas. 2 weeks from today is Canada's 150th birthday. 150 years since 1867, when our four initial provinces drafted a constitution and joined together to form a federal government. Our constitution was the British North America Act, 1867, and it is the foundation upon which we have built our federal system. Along with this celebration, however, we must acknowledge that our Aboriginal peoples had been living on this land for centuries, and that is part of the story I want to tell you today. Thank you, Royal Roads, for conferring this honor on me. I have been told by the university that my honorary degree is being conferred on me today precisely because of the 150 years of our Constitution. You see, although I graduated first with a degree in mechanical engineering, I went on to earn a doctorate in political science. And for the past 60 or so years, Canada's Constitution has played a major part in my career. Way back, when I was an undergraduate in political science, I wrote a term paper that would not only change my life, but change yours as well. The paper was an analysis of how Canada could become the sole amender of its own constitution. Back in 1867, when our constitution was drafted, it was quite simply a bill of the United Kingdom's Parliament. Canada was at that time a colony of Great Britain, so any changes or amendments to our constitution could be made only by the British Parliament. Even after the Statute of Westminster was passed in Britain in 1931, giving Canada and other colonies full legal freedom, our Constitution could be amended only by Britain. So, back to my term paper. The topic was how to amend Canada's Constitution. What process would Canada need to have in place, and how would the voting proceed to bring our Constitution home? To, as has often been said, patriate our Constitution. Would we need a majority of the provinces, a majority of the population, a veto for Quebec and Ontario, who, after all, held most of the population, regional vetoes? At the age of 22, I had the answer. I proposed a formula in my term paper that could follow to bring our Constitution home. Little did I realize that about 25 years later, I would actually propose a formula that would be accepted by Canada and the provinces. I should add that none of you should despair if you don't perfect marks on your papers. I seem to recall I received only a 7 out of 10 on that one, and nary a comment in the margins. Was it ever read? My professor didn't even correct my spelling. I had spelled amend with 2 M's all the way through. No auspicious start to a career path yet to unfold. As I said, I went on to receive my Master of Arts from Western and a PhD from Duke University. I was hired to teach first at the University of Washington and then at the University of Alberta. I was like a pig in mud. At last I was back in Canada. Lots was going on in the field of federal-provincial relations and constitutional reform. And I had the stimulation of bright young minds of all political persuasions to fill my days. While I was at Duke, I came across a preliminary report on the Royal Commission on Bilingualism and Biculturalism. I read that report from cover to cover. The report stated, quote, Canada is now going through the greatest crisis since Confederation. Wow, I thought, we've got to do something about that. Prime Minister Pierre Elliott Trudeau felt the same way. In 1971, he decided to hold a conference to, among other things, propose amendments to our Constitution, to patriate the Constitution, and add a Bill of Rights. I was asked by the Premier of Alberta, then Harry Strome, to act as a consultant of the government. Of course, I agreed. The amending formula from that conference, the so-called Victoria Conference, proposed a veto of constitutional amendments to Ontario and Quebec, as well as regional vetoes for Western Canada and the Atlantic provinces. Because of Quebec's lack of agreement, solutions were not reached at that conference, but it was the beginning of a series of meetings between the federal government and the provinces, which did eventually lead to success in 1981, but still without the agreement of Quebec. In 1974, I was asked by then Premier Peter Lougheed to leave the university for a year or so to help in Alberta's Department of Federal and Intergovernmental Affairs. That year led to 10 and the deputy ministership. Prime Minister Trudeau was still in office, and he was still seeking a solution to federal-provincial friction. During my time in government, Prime Minister Trudeau held a series of rancorous conferences with the provinces on the Constitution. Headway was not being made. Mr. Trudeau lost the election in 1979, but was returned to office in 1980 with a renewed determination to end the patriation conflict once and for all. He decided that he would ask Britain to patriate the Constitution without input from the provinces. 8 provinces appealed his decision to Canada's Supreme Court, which stated that, though legal, the provinces should have a say in the issue. So, a final conference took place in Ottawa, more or less a make-or-break time for the issue. Issues on the agenda included the Charter of Rights and the Amending Formula. The same sticking point was the formula by which Canada could amend its Constitution, and this is where the term paper reappears. I was sitting with my minister one evening, writing on the back of an envelope. According to him, I handed him the envelope and said, I think this will work. The formula became the basis of the Alberta Amending Formula, which was eventually agreed to, but without the support of Quebec. There was a big ceremony in Ottawa on April 17, 1982, when Queen Elizabeth proclaimed the Constitution Act 1982. The act included Prime Minister Trudeau's Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Premier Lévesque did not attend the ceremony. Since 1982, there have been attempts to accommodate both Quebec and Canada's Indigenous people within the Canadian Constitution. I served as a member of the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples. Our 1996 report outlined the foundation of a renewed relationship for Aboriginal peoples within Canada. So far, discussions have not moved the issue forward, but after all, it's 2017. With a new young Prime Minister in power, perhaps now is the time for change. As many of you may know, the current Premier of Quebec, Philippe Couillard, has recently issued a policy on Quebec affirmation and Canadian relations. He proposes a model of federalism that would bring Quebec into the constitutional fold. All attempts since 1982 have failed to the point that reopening constitutional discussions has become a national taboo. Perhaps Premier Couillard will succeed in his attempts, and our current Prime Minister, Trudeau, will concur. Perhaps it's another beginning, only time will tell. We old war horses are turning the reins over to a new generation. You are among that new generation. I hope that you will be true to Canada, to her values, and to her aspirations, and that you will lend your voices to renewed accommodation to those who have not yet been included. Today is your day. Remember it well. Maybe you should find a memento to remind you of your part in Canada, like the framed maple leaf that hangs above my desk. My wife gave it to me to remind me of my role in serving Canada. Good wishes to you all in your future endeavors. That's the end of my speech, but before I sit down, I want to congratulate the graduates. And if you feel so, when you walk across the stage, say to your, whoever it is, "Hi, Dad, way to go, Mom. This is your day. Let them know what you think of them." Thank you very much.